And sorry that we cannot have our live session this week. As always, I'm starting from solving activity, and we will see the quiz, solving the quiz questions. And for activity 10 and quiz 10, everything is the same. Activity 10 will be due by this Sunday, and quiz 10 is available from Sunday 1 p.m. to Monday 1 p.m. as always. And except for that, we will not have our session on Wednesday. Instead, you will watch the recorded video. So let's start from the activity. The activity had three parts. The first part was about compression and the fact that we said compressing a piece of information or a text is actually finding redundant information, finding the things that have been repeated and replacing them with a placeholder. Uh, in an example that we see in the instruction, there is a text, and in this text, the words that have been repeated are taken out and replaced with a placeholder down here that resulted in significant reduction of the amount of text that we have. And we said that in the instruction, it says that the uh, list of words that you are replacing with those placeholders, like these symbols here, is called a dictionary. And the first question, when we look at the question, the first question was asking to choose a song and do the same thing, well, by step instructions, do the same thing to compress that. The lyrics that I chose is here. It's a song by Michael Jackson, "Heal the World," and I started uh, to systematically look for repeated words here and replace. So the instruction says you can, in order to find the repeated words, you can actually uh, find the do it this way. Uh, Start by finding now Control F, and here uh, find and replace. In the replace, you could simply, by putting the cursor at the very beginning of your text and putting a space here, find this space and replace that space with a paragraph placeholder. This way we can basically uh, put every word in one row so that later we can sort them. By doing this for all of them, as you can see, the text becomes one word at the beginning of each row. And then I have done that here, that I will show. I'm not doing it again. I have done it here. And then after this, by selecting these, if you did this for all the words, you would have a column, a long column like this. And then you were supposed to sort these columns by selecting those and clicking on sort here. This would, by choosing paragraphs and text, this would sort the text. And if you had any capital letter, actually by selecting those capital letters or by selecting the whole text, you could first change that to, by coming down here and making all lowercase, you could make everything lowercase, because in the sorting we would have a problem of now the capital letters uh, come before small letters, and that would cause problem. But anyways, after doing these steps, you would have the sorted column, which is all the words separated and sorted. This way you could find what is really repeating. Here, for instance, and has been repeated 3 times in this text. After doing that process, I figured out that this has been repeated. Or a word like place has been repeated 3 times. These are the repetitions. So basically, this was the process to see how the repetition, how you can detect the repeated words, and this is what I have done. After this, the second step was choosing. Well, I have assigned numbers. You could assign symbols. There's no difference actually, because I didn't have any number in my text. I chose numbers instead of those placeholders. And here is my dictionary as a result. As you can see, 1 represents the word and, 2 represents the word place, 3 represents the word there is, and 4 represents the word this. Uh, if you can, well, I can show you. For instance, I have not chosen word in, even though it has been repeated 2 times, but anything with just 1 or 2 letters is not worth doing compression, because that would not result in uh, significant compression ratio. And after this dictionary, now I have looked at the text once more and replaced the numbers, replace the words, these words with the numbers that there was, and that has resulted the in a shorter text with less characters. And in step 4 or question 4 of the activity, you were asked to calculate the compression ratio. To calculate the compression ratio, we have to first see how many. If I change it back to the original text, if we need to know how many characters basically we have in the original text. And how do we do that? By selecting the text and clicking on the words, and it exactly shows how many characters I have with the spaces. So 210 spaces is for the original. So I have put in here 210 characters with the space. And for the compressed text, um, here, after replacing those repeated words with numbers, now do the same thing, select and look at this, and it shows it's only 160 characters. 160 characters for the compressed text. Plus, because you have to include your dictionary in the file, this also counts, but without the spaces, because in storing these, you don't need to keep track of the spaces in the dictionary, but you have to keep track of the spaces in the original file, otherwise everything will be messed up. So here we select this and we look at the uh, number of characters with no spaces, which is 23, and adding these two divided by 210, now the compressed text with this method is only 87% of the original text, which concludes the activity part 1. And the last part is, if you can you build uh, the original text now by replacing those numbers with the words using the dictionary. Well, the answer is yes. Obviously, we can go back and revert the process and put words instead of those numbers, and we can see the original text. And that means this algorithm that we did is lossless. Um, it means there was no loss of data here, which is a lossless algorithm. For the for the part two, actually, the question is about how much resizing can be done using a zip. So what we do is, you see my folder for activity 9, and I have zipped all these uh, files that I have in this file. If you zip, the question is about opening that zip file. Open with you should do it this way, because if I double click on this, it will open it with a default software that I have for zipping, which is, like in my case, is WinRAR. But you have to right click on this and open this with File Explorer. And in File Explorer, this view is what you had to take a snapshot and put here in part 2, and answer the following questions. So here, what we see is the information about not only the type of the files, but also about the original size of these files, compressed size. This is the original size. This is the file after the file has been compressed, and this is the compression ratio, which is interesting and leads us to our next two questions, which were the questions about what is the lowest compression ratio and what is the highest compression ratio. The lowest compression ratio we see here is for a GIF file, and also for a JPG file. It's also very insignificant. It's very small. The reason we discussed is that GIF and JPG are already compressed formats. So when a GIF file is being created out of the source image file, a significant portion of that is being compressed, and that's why with further compressing that file, we don't gain that much. And the other question is about what is the highest ratio that we see here. The highest ratio is for a text file, which is 51%, which is obviously for the text file that we had here, codes for compression. If I open this, you will see that there is a lot of repetition in the text. So all these repeated parts, see, like the whole paragraph has been repeated here, and all this uh, uh, helps for achieving a very high compression ratio. So the higher the repetition you have, the higher repetition you have in your file, the higher will be the compression ratio, as we see for this text file. The third question is about backup, and the simplest backup that we can create is basically by compressing all the files that we want to back up, making a zip file, and putting that zip file in a different place on a storage device, like a hard disk drive, an external hard disk drive, and keep it in a place that is different with the place that we are working, and on a daily basis we are generating our data. And speaking of backup routine and how to ensure that your backup is correct and is current, um, it depends on the amount of data actually you generate. If you are generating new files on a daily basis, it's a good practice uh, to have a backup at the end of every day. If you are doing this manually, if you are not using cloud, for instance, OneDrive for taking backup, because with OneDrive everything is getting synchronously done behind the scene and we don't need to take any backup. But if it is manual, it's a good practice to do it as frequent as possible. And to ensure that your backup is current, actually, you can. What I used to do was I put date, like I named the backup files and added the date and time. So based on the date and time, you can sort these files and see what was the latest backup that you have. For the backup, we had uh, three rules basically. The first rule was to have a complete copy of what has been changed at least, and then store them in a in an in a place that is not dependent on your platform. In this case, by storing that in an external flash memory or a hard disk drive, it's not um, it's not dependent on my platform anymore. And if my laptop, for instance, breaks, I will still have that file. And by keeping that in a different place, for instance, if I'm at work, by taking that uh, drive every night, taking that with me home, I can keep that in a geographically separate and different place, and that's how it works. So if something goes wrong in my workplace, I would still have my data available with me at home on a flash memory or a hard disk drive. Um, and uh, Now, if in an extreme case, if I lose my laptop, how am I gonna do my homework? How am I gonna do my project? Now, assume that you have your data. This brings us to the basically to the cloud computing solution. Now, if you have a cloud, if you have stored all the data on a cloud, you can simply use another person's computer, or you can use your PC or another device or even your phone to connect to the cloud and be able to use the softwares that are on cloud. For instance, on OneDrive, you have access to all the Microsoft Word softwares, so you can do your job in that very extreme case, which turns out to be very useful. Um, and Says how long it would take. Obviously, it would take longer than if you had your main machine, your laptop with you. But the fact that you don't lose your data and you'll be able to still do your job is a big merit of this. Okay, this was the end of the activity. Now we're gonna go ahead and answer quiz questions. Okay, in quiz questions this week we had a lot of fill in the blank type of questions and short answer questions. What is an advantage of file compression? We said the main advantage is lower size on disk. So the main reason we are compressing files is that they take less space than they are when they are not compressed. Other benefits were being able to encrypt those files as well, so that if they are stolen, at least uh, it's not the information is not leaked at least. Um, Backups do not matter, only restore matters. That's true, because if you have a backup that you are not able to restore, the whole idea of having backup is useless. Can two-way file synchronization with a cloud service be considered as backup? The answer is no, actually. because when they are two-way synchronized files, it actually means one file coexists in two different places, in local place in your machine and on the cloud. And as soon as you delete one of those, the other one will be deleted. But in cloud services like OneDrive, as an example, uh, if you delete a file locally, it will not be deleted online forever. And actually, there will be another version copied in somewhere else that in OneDrive they keep it for 90 days for you. So even if you delete a file by mistake, you can retrieve it because there is a copy existing there. In this case, this can be considered as a temporary backup. But if clouds don't have this backup mechanisms to offer, two-way synchronized files are not considered backup files. Uh, and the classic way of backupping included full backup. You may have full backup or differential or incremental. In differential, we said that you back up the difference that has been made to the files compared to the last time you did a full backup, and in incremental one you back up different the differences made to all the files compared to the last backup, not last full backup. So if you did a differential backup yesterday and you're doing today again, it's not compared to the full backup which you might have done 2 months ago. It's just compared to yesterday. We talked about pros and cons of these, by the way. If you want, you can review the slides. And question 5, what are the characteristics of lossless and lossy compression? We said that lossless compression is a compression algorithm that all the data is maintained. You don't lose any data, and the uncompressed file is exactly equal and same and identical to the original file. But in lossy um, compression, we are losing some trivial data, and it's a sacrifice we make to make the size of the file significantly small, which is very popular in audio and video files. Almost all audio and video files are uh, getting rid of some trivial information that will not be necessary, and they make files much more smaller than the original one. Question 6, what are the two most common causes of unintentional data loss? Of course, one of them is physical damage, and the other one is accidental deletion of files. Sometimes even you don't delete those. You're storing somewhere in the in the network of yours, and the network administrator or cleanup or any other accidental deletions can affect your files. And question 7, what operating system feature on PCs or Macs can be used to restore? You're all familiar with file history and system restore, for instance, on Windows, and you have to define a breakpoint, and that will be the date. And after that, every time you want to restore your computer will travel in time back to that date, and a snapshot of your system at that time will be restored. What is the 3-2-1 backup checklist? Change the source file only, not the backup. Uh, Keep it in a different platform. That the storage medium should not be platform dependent. For instance, a different hard disk, a removable hard disk, stuff like that. And place it in a geographically separate area. If your backup is a backup of your office, then at least keep that at home. And question 9, the name, which is also the file extension for the most standard general purpose archive, is .zip. And question 9, what is the definition of a backup? A backup is a copy that is stored in a different platform and is stored in a different place. If it doesn't have a copy of files, doesn't have these two uh, specifications, it's not considered a reliable and a complete backup. What kind of storage controller is installed on servers? We talked about RAID, which was a multiple hard disk or storage devices, basically, that data was being written in all of them at the same time, so all had a copy of the other one. Um, and this is basically a relatively complicated system that can guarantee you never lose your data because of damage, because of physical damage. And question 12, what is a disadvantage and drawback to file compression? Which is, we know that file compression requires both CPU and memory time. Sometimes if you have lots of files in a uh, in a in a zip file, that will result in significant time for your computer to uncompress that file or vice versa. So it requires CPU and memory resources, which is a bottleneck of that. And this was basically the last question. Thanks so much for watching this video, and the next video will be the lecture for week 10.